What if I told you the way you've been praying your entire life is not the way Jesus prayed? What if the most powerful prayer technique Jesus ever used was quietly removed, forgotten, or never explained? Not because it didn't work, but because it worked too well. This is not a video to attack churches. This is not a video to reject faith. This is a video to recover something ancient, something dangerous, something life-changing. Jesus once said, "When you pray, do not keep babbling like the pagans." So why are we still taught to repeat words, beg, plead, and wait? Why did Jesus often disappear into the wilderness? Why did he pray in silence, alone at night? Why did miracles happen instantly, without long prayers, rituals, or permission from religious authorities? What if prayer was never about asking God to come to you, but about realizing God was already within you? Across Australia, from busy cities to silent coastlines, more people are leaving religion, yet searching harder than ever for meaning, peace, and truth. And maybe, just maybe, the answer was never in louder prayers, bigger buildings, or more rules. What if the prayer Jesus used wasn't spoken, wasn't emotional, wasn't desperate, but was a state of being? In this video, you're about to discover the silent prayer technique Jesus actually practiced, why asking blocks the very thing you're praying for, how stillness was the source of his power, and why modern churches rarely talk about this anymore. But be warned, once you understand this, prayer will never feel the same again. You may stop begging. You may stop waiting. You may stop feeling separate from God. So if you're ready to uncover what was hidden in plain sight, if you're ready to experience prayer, not perform it, then stay with me and watch this till the end. And before we begin, like this video, share it with someone who's questioning their faith. Comment, "I choose stillness" below and subscribe, because truth like this isn't taught in buildings. It's remembered within. Orange heart. Anxiety is no longer something people whisper about in private. It has become a background noise of daily life. You feel it when you wake up and check your phone, when you look at the news, when you think about money, relationships, the future, or even your place in the world. Loneliness is rising even though we're more connected than ever. Natural disasters dominate headlines. Fires burning through entire regions, floods swallowing neighborhoods, unpredictable weather reminding us that nothing feels stable anymore. Add the constant pressure of rising costs, shrinking security, and the feeling that no system is really designed to protect everyday people. And you begin to understand why so many are quietly asking deeper questions about meaning, safety, and purpose. Across cultures and countries, including places like Australia and the United States, something fascinating is happening. People are stepping away from traditional institutions, but they're not stepping away from spirituality. Churches may be emptier, yet meditation apps are exploding. Breathwork retreats are booked months in advance. Ancient practices are being rediscovered, not as religion, but as survival tools for the soul. Indigenous wisdom, especially the idea of listening to silence and being in relationship with the land, is suddenly being taken seriously by people who once dismissed anything outside modern systems. There's a deep hunger beneath all of this, not for more rules or doctrines, but for something real, something felt, something that brings peace instead of pressure. This is where an important realization begins to surface. People aren't leaving God. They're leaving outdated systems that no longer speak to their lived reality. They're leaving fear-based frameworks that make them feel small, broken, or unworthy. What they're searching for is connection without condemnation, depth without dogma, and truth that can be experienced rather than just explained. And this search leads us to revisit one of the most misunderstood aspects of spirituality: prayer. For many people, prayer has been taught as asking, pleading, or repeating words over and over again, hoping that somehow enough effort, enough emotion, or enough desperation will convince God to respond. It often becomes a transaction. You ask for help when things go wrong. You beg for forgiveness when you feel guilty. You plead for protection when fear takes over. In some traditions, prayer is long spoken aloud, filled with formal language and repetition, as if the sheer volume of words could bridge the gap between you and the divine. Beneath this approach is an image of God as external, distant, watching from somewhere far away, deciding whether you're worthy enough to be answered. What's rarely acknowledged is that this version of prayer often produces more anxiety, not less. If prayers go unanswered, people blame themselves. Maybe they didn't pray hard enough. Maybe they lacked faith. Maybe God is disappointed. Prayer, instead of being a refuge, becomes another source of pressure. And yet, right in the heart of the Christian tradition, there's a warning that many have heard but few have truly absorbed. Jesus himself said that people think they will be heard because of their many words. It's a quiet but radical statement. It challenges the assumption that more talking equals deeper connection. If Jesus warned against empty repetition and word-heavy prayer, then an uncomfortable question naturally arises. Why do we still do it this way? Why has prayer been reduced to verbal effort when the teacher at the center of Christianity modeled something entirely different? To answer that, we have to look beyond what was later institutionalized and return to how Jesus actually lived and prayed. Again and again, the Gospels describe Jesus withdrawing to lonely places. He goes into the desert, he climbs mountains, he prays at night away from crowds, away from noise, away from performance. These weren't dramatic public moments designed to impress anyone. They were intimate encounters rooted in silence. Silence in this context wasn't emptiness. It wasn't absence. It was presence. It was the space where connection became possible. In silence, there's nothing to prove, nothing to say, nothing to manipulate. There's only awareness. This is deeply important because it reveals that prayer, as Jesus practiced it, was not about filling space with words. It was about entering a state of alignment. Silence wasn't passive, it was powerful. It allowed him to listen, to rest in something deeper than thought, to reconnect with what he called the Father. And this wasn't a distant God somewhere in the sky. This was an intimate, immediate reality. Another striking detail is how Jesus spoke and acted after prayer. He never begged. He never pleaded. When people came to him for healing, he didn't ask God to intervene on their behalf. He spoke with authority, not arrogance, but certainty. Your faith has made you whole. Be healed. Rise and walk. These weren't requests sent upward. They were declarations flowing outward from an inner state. This wasn't ego, it was consciousness rooted in unity. That sense of authority didn't come from believing he was separate and specially favored. It came from knowing his oneness. When he said, "I and the Father are one," he wasn't claiming exclusivity. He was revealing a state of awareness. And he reinforced this again when he told people that the kingdom of God is within you, not coming later, not arriving from the outside, already present, already accessible. This changes everything about prayer. If the kingdom is within, then prayer is not about convincing God to do something. It's about aligning yourself with what already is. It's an inner transformation rather than an outer request. Jesus wasn't teaching people how to ask better. He was teaching them how to be different from the inside out. Over time, this inner approach was overshadowed by structures that favored control, uniformity, and external authority. A subtle but powerful shift occurred. Prayer became something you do to reach God, instead of something you enter to remember your connection with God. The technique wasn't lost because it was wrong. It was lost because it couldn't be controlled. At the heart of this forgotten approach is stillness combined with inner union. It's deceptively simple, which is why it's often overlooked. Stillness means no words, no requests, no mental bargaining. It means allowing the nervous system to calm, the breath to soften, the constant mental commentary to slow down. In this state, you're not trying to get somewhere. You're arriving where you already are. As the body relaxes and the mind quiets, something else becomes noticeable. A sense of presence that doesn't depend on thought. A feeling of being held, connected, complete. This is where the idea of oneness stops being philosophical and becomes experiential. God is no longer out there. The separation dissolves. There's a knowing, not in words, but in being. From this place, prayer shifts again. You don't ask for peace because peace is already present. You don't ask for healing because you're no longer identifying solely with brokenness. You feel wholeness, even if symptoms remain. You don't ask for guidance because clarity arises naturally when fear quiets down. You become the answer instead of asking for it. This helps explain why, in the stories, miracles happened instantly. There was no delay because there was no distance. No waiting because nothing needed to travel from heaven to earth. Change occurred the moment alignment happened. The outer world responded to an inner shift. This isn't about denying pain or pretending everything is fine. It's about approaching life from a deeper center. When you operate from fear, prayer becomes desperation. When you operate from union, prayer becomes expression. The difference is subtle but profound. In a world overwhelmed by noise, information, and constant stimulation, this kind of prayer feels almost revolutionary. It doesn't require belief in dogma. It doesn't demand membership in an institution. It doesn't even require specific language. It requires honesty, willingness, and the courage to be still. This may be why so many people today are drawn to meditation, breathwork, and ancient wisdom traditions. They're not abandoning spirituality. They're rediscovering it in forms that speak directly to their nervous systems and lived experiences. They're intuitively moving back toward what Jesus demonstrated, even if they don't use religious language to describe it. The tragedy isn't that people stopped praying. It's that many were never taught how to pray in a way that brings freedom instead of fear. When prayer is reclaimed as inner alignment rather than external pleading, it stops being exhausting. It becomes nourishing. It becomes something you return to, not something you perform. And in a time marked by uncertainty, pressure, and collective anxiety, this shift may be more than personal. It may be necessary. Backhand index pointing right. When we start looking at this through the lens of modern science, something remarkable happens. What once sounded mystical or symbolic suddenly becomes measurable. Neuroscience now tells us that stillness is not just relaxing, it physically reshapes the brain. When a person enters deep calm, when the breath slows and the mind stops chasing thoughts, neural pathways associated with fear, stress, and survival begin to quiet down. At the same time, areas linked to awareness, compassion, clarity, and emotional regulation become stronger. The brain literally rewires itself toward peace. This isn't belief. This is biology. Scientists studying meditation have observed that long-term practitioners show reduced activity in the amygdala, the brain's fear center, and increased coherence between different brain regions. In simple terms, the mind becomes more unified, less fragmented, less reactive, more present. And what's fascinating is that this mirrors exactly what silent prayer was meant to do. When Jesus withdrew into silence, he wasn't escaping the world. He was regulating his inner world so that he could engage the outer one from clarity rather than chaos. Then there's the heart. For a long time, we thought the brain was the sole command center of the body. Now research shows that the heart has its own complex neural network and communicates constantly with the brain. When breathing becomes slow and steady, the heart enters a state known as coherence. In this state, heart rhythms become smooth and harmonious, and this directly influences the brain, immune system, and emotional state. People report feeling grounded, safe, connected, and clear. Ancient traditions called this peace. Science calls it coherence. The experience is the same. This is why breathwork has become so popular. It's not a trend, it's a rediscovery. Conscious breathing shifts the body out of survival mode and into regulation. Silent prayer does the same thing. When words fall away and attention rests inward, the heart and brain synchronize. You don't feel like you're talking to God. You feel like you're resting in God. Even quantum physics begins to echo this truth in its own language. The observer effect suggests that the act of observation influences outcome. Reality, at its most fundamental level, is not fixed and separate from the observer. Consciousness plays a role. While this doesn't mean thoughts magically control the universe, it does suggest that inner state matters far more than we once believed. Jesus' emphasis on inner alignment suddenly sounds less metaphorical and more foundational. When he spoke about faith, he wasn't describing positive thinking. He was describing a state of being that participates in reality differently. This understanding has parallels in indigenous Australian Dreamtime, where the inner journey is inseparable from the outer world. Dreamtime isn't just mythology. It's a way of perceiving reality as layered, interconnected, alive. The land isn't separate from consciousness. Silence isn't empty. It's full of memory, meaning, and presence. When elders speak of listening to the land, they're describing a form of prayer without words, a relationship, not a request. Across cultures, across time, the same pattern appears. Stillness opens perception. Breath anchors awareness. Inner alignment restores balance. What modern science is validating, ancient spirituality has always known. And what Jesus lived and demonstrated sits perfectly at this intersection. So why did this way of prayer quietly disappear from mainstream teaching? This is where we need to speak gently, not with blame or attack, but with honesty. Inner power changes everything. When people discover that peace, guidance, and connection are accessible within, dependency decreases. Fear loses its grip. External authority weakens. Silent prayer can't be monitored. It can't be measured by attendance, volume, or obedience. It can't be controlled. Institutions, by their nature, survive on structure and authority. There's nothing inherently evil about that, but structure often replaces experience. Over time, teachings that emphasize direct inner access to the divine become uncomfortable. They don't require permission. They don't require intermediaries. They don't reinforce hierarchy. A person who knows how to sit in silence and touch presence doesn't need to be told they are unworthy. They don't need fear to motivate devotion. A silent, awakened human doesn't need permission. That truth isn't dangerous, but it is disruptive. And so prayer gradually shifted from inner communion to external performance, from being to asking, from silence to speech. Not because the original way was wrong, but because it was too powerful to regulate. Now, instead of just talking about this, there's something far more important: experiencing it. Right now, wherever you are, nothing else matters for a few moments. Let your eyes close if that feels comfortable. There's nothing you need to imagine, nothing you need to believe. Just allow the body to settle. Let the breath slow down naturally, not forcing it, just noticing it. Inhale gently, exhale softly. Feel the weight of your body where it's supported. Let your shoulders drop. Let the jaw relax. Let the forehead smooth out. There's nowhere to go, nothing to fix. As the breath becomes calm, allow the words in your mind to fade. You don't need to finish thoughts. You don't need to push them away. Just stop feeding them. Let silence open up inside you. Notice that silence doesn't feel empty. It feels present. A quiet awareness that's already here. Rest your attention there. Now, very gently, without speaking aloud, let a simple knowing arise. I am already heard. There's no distance between you and what you're seeking. Let that land not as a sentence, but as a feeling. Stay with the breath. Stay with the stillness. And again, softly, internally, allow this recognition. I am already one, not trying to become, not reaching, just remembering. Sit here, no effort, no performance, just presence. This is prayer. As this presence settles, it becomes easier to sense how spirituality was never meant to be confined to buildings. When you step outside and feel the ground beneath your feet, when you hear waves hitting the shore, when you look up at the sky stretching endlessly above you, something ancient wakes up inside. Creation itself feels alive, connected, responsive. Jesus walked through fields, deserts, hills, and along water. His teachings came from seeds, storms, birds, and soil. He didn't need temples to access God. Nature was enough. Silence was enough. Presence was enough. When prayer is understood this way, the ocean becomes a sanctuary. The land becomes sacred. The sky becomes a reminder that you're part of something vast and intelligent. God isn't locked behind walls or rituals. God is everywhere because presence is everywhere. You don't need a church to pray. Creation itself is the temple. And this brings us to something that needs to be said clearly, not harshly, but truthfully. Life is too short to spend it praying from fear, too precious to waste begging for what's already within reach. Prayer was never meant to make you smaller. It was meant to wake you up. Stop begging, start becoming. Silence is prayer, presence is power. And perhaps the most important thing to remember is this: Jesus didn't come to be worshipped. He came to show you who you really are. Orange heart. Soft music fades in long pause, slow breath. If this message unsettled you, that's not an accident. Truth doesn't always feel comfortable. It feels familiar. What you've just heard isn't something new. It's something ancient. Something you once knew, before prayer became words, fear, and waiting. Jesus never taught people to beg God. He taught them to remember who they were. And once you understand that, silence stops feeling empty. Stillness stops feeling awkward. And prayer stops feeling powerless. From this moment on, you have a choice. You can go back to repeating words and hoping someone is listening. Or you can enter stillness and realize you were never unheard. This is why this teaching was never shouted. It was whispered, because only those ready to listen truly hear. If something inside you shifted while watching this, don't ignore it. Sit with it. Practice the silence. Let the prayer happen within you, not outside you. And if this video helped you see prayer in a new way, like this video so more people can find it. Share it with someone who's questioning their faith. Comment below what you felt during the silence. And subscribe, because the most powerful truths were never meant to be controlled, only remembered.